Brexit. How will it end? Are you sitting comfortably? Brexit. Like all good storybooks, this story's got plenty of twists and turns. Heroes and villains, good and bad. But how, if and when will it end? Why did we join the EU in the first place? Where did the desire to leave it come from? And most importantly, what kind of deal will we get from the EU? Let's begin. 1950. The European Coal and Steel Community forms. The UK, having had its GDP grow during World War II, felt a closer union with Europe would weaken its economic strength, and so refused to join. It took until 1961, when UK GDP was at a low of 10%, before Prime Minister Harold Macmillan approached the continent about joining the European community. In 1963, however, French President Charles de Gaulle vetoed our membership. It took another 2 years of UK economic decline and for him to resign before we could fail to join the EEC, and another 8 years to officially join. In 1974, the Labour government offered a referendum on the matter, and in 1975, 2/3 of the UK voted in favour of staying in. So why did we want to leave it?
In December 2015, the UKIP Parliamentary Resources Unit introduced this paper, European Banks Not Fixed Yet. It looked at how Europe's biggest banks would survive if there was a repeat of the last financial crisis, and it concluded that none of them would survive without state assistance.
The banking crisis of 2008 led to the collapse of many European economies: Ireland, Spain, and most prominently, Greece. Most required IMF bailouts, and the UK, being so close and so reliant on the EU, was in turn affected economically by it.
Because if you rob people of their identity, if you rob them of their democracy, then all they are left with is nationalism and violence. I can only hope and pray that the Euro project is destroyed by the markets before that really happens.
The UK Independence Party, a party whose main aim was to get Britain to leave the EU, were gaining ever-increasing vote share and political traction in the UK. So were the Eurosceptic Tory backbenchers. It meant that the Prime Minister of the time, David Cameron, had to promise a referendum in the Tory manifesto for the 2015 election. He thought he could easily win it like he won Scotland in the Scottish referendum, using Project Fear as the message. But we all know he was wrong. As for the reasons why people voted the way they did, it can be interpreted into two main categories. The first being immigration, and the second being a vote against the establishment. To understand the British attitude towards immigration, we must first take a look at British culture.
We are Poles. We work until we die. Yeah, we send our money always back for big families in Poland. Yeah.
I'm gonna be late now. Oh, look at this. Bloody paper complaining about immigration again.
I don't know why you buy that paper.
Because I agree with it. Too many bloody immigrants coming to this country.
You're an immigrant, Dad?
I'm not an immigrant, sweetie. I've been here 30 years. Immigrants are the Eastern Europeans. Coming over here taking our jobs. Jobs meant for us Pakistanis.
Immigrants have been continually identified as undeserving leeches, a security menace, an existential threat to British values, and thus a fitting target of resentment. But so has the stereotypes, speech laws, and racism that surrounds them. Multiculturalism causes and defends against racism, and racism is either blamed on multiculturalism by the right, or blamed on non-multiculturalism by the left. Immigration has increased, so have social reform laws. People have felt more and more constricted by political correctness. Political correctness has left people voiceless in their opinions against immigrants for fear of being labelled racist. It's no surprise then that Brexit was such a surprise to the pollsters. Whether the comedy of the time was a reaction against political correctness or immigration depends largely on whether you view the Brexit vote as a product of the establishment. The vote could have been a vote for both, but it certainly seems that Parliament is pushing for the first rather than the latter.
In brass tacks though, does that mean that you would like to see more or fewer people from other parts of the European Union coming to the UK?
It probably means there would be fewer, but I think we should also recognise that there is a massive contribution made to our health service, education and manufacturing industry.
So I think it is important that we continue, and we will continue to say that we do want to bring net migration down to sustainable levels. We believe that is the tens of thousands.
As for voting against the establishment, you have to vote against expectations. Vote against advice, vote against the status quo, and that's exactly what we did. Why? Some people blame Cameron, his government, his campaign. Some people blame Corbyn for his lack of enthusiasm in the campaign. Some people blame the bankers, they caused austerity, so people didn't listen to them, and some blamed immigrants for the banking crash of 2008. Some people blamed Farage and Boris. They weren't part of the same circles of government and therefore gained our ears. But most blame the establishment of Brussels that had become a symbol of bureaucracy who failed to offer a decent deal with Prime Minister Cameron before the vote. Whether you feel the vote was a vote against the establishment really depends on what you define as the establishment. Whether you feel the vote was a vote against immigration depends on what you define as foreign to you. Nobody really knows why we voted because, like any referendum, the vote was a binary choice between staying and leaving we chose. So the two main parties campaigned to take us out of Europe in the election, and nobody won. So where does that leave negotiations now? Brexit Secretary David Davis wanted talks on leaving the EU and trade deals to happen simultaneously, but it's now known trade talks won't happen until the autumn, with divorce talks happening first. Mr Tusk wants to settle the divorce bill, which could be as high as $50 billion first. Britain could have a few years after March 2019 when it does not have to give up all the benefits of membership to ease the shift for people and business. Theresa May has made assurances to EU citizens who live in the UK that they can stay. And she got the Queen's speech passed, but only just. So now it all depends on what the EU thinks of us.
There is no reason to pretend that this is a happy day, neither in Brussels nor in London. After all, most Europeans, including almost half the British voters, wish that we would stay together, not drift apart. As for me, I will not pretend that that I'm happy today. But paradoxically, there is also something positive in Brexit. Brexit has made us, the community of 27, more determined and more united than before.
What does business think of us?
Everyone who has a production site at the very moment in Britain is concerned about the developments which say that you want a hard Brexit. If the doors to Europe would be in one or another way partly closed, then production in Britain would suffer.
The EU, which formed after World War II, will want to protect the unity of Europe. Some businesses will want tariff-free access to goods, which might mean being in the single market. In the end, comes a battle between the economy and immigration. Do you protect the economy and favour the view of businesses, or do you favour the people in order to stop immigration? If austerity ends, the economy does well, and the political landscape of the UK stays relatively stable, the people will be granted their wish. But if any of those things change, it could spell the end for a hard Brexit, and we remain in the single market. That's if a deal is reached at all. The story continues. Thanks for watching, join in the debate below and subscribe.